Bienvenidos a la Mesa, a speaker series where we create a table to amplify the voices of Latinx people, showcase the exemplary diversity of our communities, and envision an inclusive future for Latinos. Our first two discussions were live conversations, and you can find the recordings on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe and follow us on Twitter. In the next few weeks, we will upload those into a podcast feed where you can access them anytime, anywhere. As the series grows, we'd love to hear from you. Who would you like to hear from? What topic should we be discussing? All suggestions are welcome, and you can find the speaker suggestion form in the description and on our website. English or in Espanol, we want these conversations to be wide-ranging and accessible. That will happen as we continue to grow this platform. So thank you and gracias por el apoyo. Today's guest is Lisette Carbajal. Lisette and I have been friends for about 7 years now. Is that right, Lisette?
Yeah, long time.
Long time. And she's one of the most vibrant and tenacious people that I know. Her parents immigrated to the United States from Lima, Peru. And though she was born here, Spanish is Lisette's first language. She worked her way from community college to the University of Virginia, where she majored in foreign affairs with a concentration in Latinoamérica. We met during our graduate studies at Virginia Tech, where she received her master's in public administration. Lisette has dedicated her career to public service. In 2014, Governor Terry McAuliffe appointed her as policy advisor and as Virginia's Latino liaison to his administration. In this role, she advised the governor on policy and legislative priorities related to the Latinx community, Secretary of Administration, Secretary of Technology, and the Secretary of Health and Human Resources. She's served as policy advisor at the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services and advocated for nursing homes and assisted living facilities as Director of Government Affairs for the Virginia Health Carte Association. She currently works in government affairs for CapitalOne. Service is the name of the game for Lisette. She served on the Virginia Board of Health Professions and the Virginia Advisory Board in Service and Volunteerism. She currently serves on the Board of Visitors to Mount Vernon, the Alzheimer's Association Greater Richmond Chapter Board of Directors, and the Virginia Health Catalyst Board of Directors. She's also engaged with other Alzheimer's related organizations, including Us Against Alzheimer's and Hilarity for Charity. Lisette, welcome.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I have heard your other interviews and they were so inspiring and so amazing. I'm just really excited to be participating in La Mesa. And when you told me about the idea, I just thought it was fabulous. There's no way I could say no. So thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful. I really am. So let's just jump in and start, as we do most of these conversations, from the very beginning. What was it like growing up as a Latina in Virginia?
Yeah, so my parents, like you shared, immigrated from Lima, Peru about maybe 30 plus years ago. And I was born here in the US, probably maybe 7+ years after my parents immigrated. And my brother, they actually left my older brother behind in Peru to be taken care of by my grandmother and my aunt. My mom immigrated first, and then my dad immigrated about 7 years later. So my mom didn't see my brother for almost 7 years, left him when he was 7 years old and saw him again when he was about 14, 15 years old. And my brother actually didn't meet me until I was a year old when we went back to Peru to celebrate my first birthday. So by then he came back, he came to the US his first time, and he raised me for the most part. He was also kind of going through middle school and high school and learning the English language, all while my parents worked full times, multiple jobs a day. And so my mom and my dad, both of them, you know, they worked together, whether it was cleaning houses or both worked at a hospital. Eventually they kind of started working either in like the like grocery stores, I guess, and then also the cleaning aspect always stayed. Like my mom started cleaning buildings aside from houses, also staying at the hospital, then got into like the food service. So they've always had a bunch of different jobs and worked maybe 2 to 3 jobs at a time. And so a lot of that required my brother taking care of me, or sometimes at some point, probably when I got to like 10, 12, I was just kind of taking care of myself. um, and my mom only spoke English, and my mom only spoke Spanish, and my dad only spoke Spanish at home as well. They knew just enough English to get by. And my brother only spoke to me in Spanish as well. And he was learning English as he was going through school. When I went to kindergarten, I didn't know a word of English. I remember going in there and they had books placed on the table, and the expectation was that the child would go in, sit down, read their book, engage with the other kids. And I had no idea what was happening. No one spoke Spanish. I grew up in Northern Virginia, in Centerville, Virginia. I can't say what the Latino population is there, but I just recall that there wasn't that many Latinos in my kindergarten class. There was probably 1 or 2, and one that I actually became really good friends with up until probably 1st or 2nd grade, and then she moved. But my brother actually, like I said, managed a lot of those relationships with my teachers, because my parents didn't speak English and didn't really understand the education system. So a lot of that was put on my brother to help me either get enrolled to school or select my classes as I got older, from middle school to high school, ultimately community college, and then college. And so he played a very instrumental part in that role while my parents were out working. And then throughout, kindergarten up to like high school, I guess you could say, I mean, a lot of what I did was after school was my parents cleaned these office buildings in Herndon, Virginia, and I would go with them and clean these office buildings that were like 3 stories high. And one of them was like an architecture firm, I believe, and another one was a Muslim mosque. So each level was drastically different, but I learned a lot from both floors, I guess. The 2nd floor was the architecture firm, I believe, and then the 3rd floor was the mosque. Might have that wrong, but anywho, I didn't do any much after school programs. If I did, it was really difficult because I would have to work around my parents' schedule. And sometimes I didn't have somebody to pick me up after school because, like I said, they'd work late. So that really wasn't an option, like playing soccer or anything like that. One thing that my parents did sacrifice was I did do Peruvian dance, so traditional Peruvian music. And it was a little bit of a sacrifice because we did clean these buildings after school, and like practice was Tuesdays and Thursdays, let's just say, all the way in Arlington, Virginia. And we live in Sterling. That was probably like 45 to an hour, depending on traffic. And so the days that I had practice, my dad would say, well, I'll go clean the office buildings by myself. And that was a lot for him to do by himself, but knew how much that made me happy, and knew how much it was important to like learn about our culture and just how much I enjoyed dancing. And so they kind of traded off. Sometimes my mom would go, sometimes my dad would take me, et cetera, et cetera. So that was probably all the way up until high school, I want to say. And we like I said, we cleaned those office buildings for a while. And you know it's so crazy what a small world we live in. That mosque that we cleaned ultimately became this larger mosque in Sterling, Virginia, and actually I work obviously in the political sphere, has a lot of I want to say a lot of political influence. Like I've noticed that candidates make an effort to go and visit this mosque and meet the community. And when I worked in the governor's office, I ended up working with an individual who was his grandfather had a prominent like position there. And when he passed away, I saw it on his Facebook and I saw it on social media, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember this individual. Like, I'm pretty sure he was at the mosque that I used to clean growing up. And so I asked him, because at this point we're working together in the McAuliffe administration. He said, yeah, I grew up at that mosque. I was like, in Herndon, Virginia. And he said, yeah. I said, oh my gosh, my family used to clean that mosque. He's like, get out, and he was a little older than I was. So he was probably like 5 years older than me. He probably doesn't remember me. I was like 10, going around, picking up the trash, vacuuming, whatever. And I was like, small world. And now we're both working for a gubernatorial administration. And it was really funny. So I just had to add that. But But yeah, so then once I finished high school, my parents were not in the know about college. They didn't really expect, not that not that it was a big no-no or anything like that. It just wasn't really something they knew about or knew that it was an opportunity for me. So even my grades through high school, it was kind of just, they knew that the child needed to go to school and needed to get an education, and that was about it. Like grades and extracurricular activities and honors classes, all that was kind of just not something that they were aware of. Speaking to a guidance counselor, most of the time it was myself speaking. I didn't have the best grades. So like there wasn't this really expectation in me to go to college. My brother had gone to community college for a little while and then decided that that wasn't, the road he wanted to go, and just went off and did his own thing. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll go to community college. I mean, what else am I going to do? By then we moved to Fauquier County, which is the outskirts of Northern Virginia. It's a little more rural. It's definitely not Southwest Virginia, but it's a little more rural than Arlington and Alexandria. And so there wasn't much for me to do there. So I had a part-time job at Starbucks and started going full-time to community college. And I had seen that some of my friends from high school did go off to college. Some of them went to community colleges. Some of them just decided that they didn't want to go to college, period. And so I was kind of stuck in between. Like, I mean, I kind of don't want to stick around this town, but I don't know if I'm ready to go to a 4-year school. And the schools that I had been accepted to, I wasn't so thrilled about. But really the major crux, and I haven't gone into it yet, was that my father was really sick. And it would ultimately, the decision to go to college, community college, became so much more important as I saw my father's health decline during the 2 years I was there. And it was the best decision I could have made. And so I ended up going to community college for 2 years, and I got accepted to all these schools. I applied to all these schools that I mind you, growing up, we watched soccer, but I didn't like soccer. I liked basketball and football. And again, I didn't know much about colleges, but once I did, I started following football and basketball related colleges. So UNC Chapel Hill, basketball, Alabama, football, James Madison. At that time, they had just beat Virginia Tech in football. So I was like, oh my gosh, their football team must be awesome. And then Virginia Tech because of football. And then UVA, I was like, I mean, it's an hour down my house, like down from my house. I mean, I guess I'll apply. I don't even, they have an awful football team, and their basketball team, I don't know. I think it was like Mike Scott at the time. And I can't even remember who it was, but like, it was just okay. And there was just nothing thrilling to me about UVA. So, like obviously I ended up going to UVA, and again, one of the best decisions I could have made. And what I haven't shared yet is that during that time from high school, cleaning those office buildings, doing dance, going to community college, and then transferring to UVA, my dad started having some cognitive impairment issues, especially during high school. And he would forget simple things, and it would go completely over my head. I wouldn't really think about it. Until that same mosque that I was sharing with you, one individual, I was probably like 14 or so, she told me, your father forgot to put, I don't know, let's just say it was the trash bin or something back where it was supposed to be. I saw him go around in circles a couple times, and I vividly remember this. He was washing the coffee cup, this individual was, who worked there. And I was just with my trash bag, kind of just standing there like, okay, hurry up, get to the point, I need to take out the trash. He said, my father started off like that, and he was diagnosed with dementia. I don't know how old your father is, but I think you should, take a look into that or tell your mom. And to me, I was just like, I have no idea what that is. Okay. And it just stuck with me. And that brief conversation as a 14, 13-year-old, however old I was, when I talk about my father, replays in my mind. It just remember that conversation so vividly. And of course, the sense of guilt of maybe I should have noticed the signs earlier, but I didn't. And dad, like I shared, going to community college was the best decision I could make, because by the time I had my first year in college, community college, dad couldn't remember how to get home. He'd get pulled over constantly. He'd be driving right in the middle of the road. He didn't have, like, his peripheral vision was off. He was getting in accidents. He was getting tickets until one point he was pulled over and he had no idea where he lived or how to get home. And he was escorted home by the police officer and he got his license revoked. And at that point, we were thinking, there's just no way he's going to pass the test. And mind you, my father had no schooling. He didn't go to kindergarten, middle school, or anything. He was taught how to read and write by, he grew up very, very poor, by a woman who essentially raised him by getting the corner of a ruler and, like, I guess the word would be like edging out the letters, and he would grab his pencil and kind of trace it. And so he would then learn, like, this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, this is an N, and then kind of sound out the words. Reading, he didn't really know how to read. He knew a little bit. He learned over time, but just enough to get him by. And so taking a test for us was like, there's just no way, because first of all, dad did fine when he first got his license, way back in the day, but now we could obviously tell there's something wrong. He's just not going to pass the test. And he didn't. There was just no way. And dad was having mood swings. Dad was really sick. And so then those 2 years I was in community college, after his license got revoked, I think probably after my first year, I was the one giving him rides to the grocery store. He was a courtesy clerk at a grocery store. And then I would drive myself back to Starbucks or back to college. And then either my brother would go pick him up and this and that. So it kind of was a blessing in disguise that I didn't go off to a 4-year school, that I wanted to go into community college, because I was able to help in that way. And then finally, dad was diagnosed my 3rd year in college, my first semester when I transferred to UVA. After years, mind you, since high school up to 3rd year in college, dad was diagnosed with depression. He was maybe slightly bipolar, they thought, maybe dementia. I don't know. Like, we could never get a clear answer. And then finally we took him to a neurologist, a really good neurologist, and they did, what they had to do. And they told us that, yeah, he has early signs of Alzheimer's. And I mean, I remember just being devastated, completely devastated. I was in the middle of finals, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And it's not like I didn't know that there was some cognitive issue there. I think the news and finally knowing exactly what it is, even though in the back of my mind I kept thinking it's probably Alzheimer's, to finally know what it was just, wow. My life just changed there. My mom was still working, cleaning houses. She was working at a grocery store as well. Now, different grocery stores, worked at different grocery stores. And my dad was still working part-time. The thing was that they needed to help pay for now me at being in college. So there was just really dad worked until he couldn't anymore. He worked as a courtesy clerk, and mind you, with early onset Alzheimer's, pushing carts as cars are coming. And he didn't want to give up his job. And my mom would pray for him every day and would say, like, no, Jose, I really think it's time. And his managers would say, like, your dad's off. And we didn't want to tell him, Alex. We said, no, we're not going to tell him he has Alzheimer's, because then they're gonna give him the boot and that's it. And then what are we going to do with dad? Now I think about it, of course, it was very dangerous that we did that. But they helped me all the way through college. Like, dad worked until I graduated. And he had no idea what was happening at graduation. He didn't know I was graduating college. I remember he was just sitting on the lawn. He was happy, he was excited, but no awareness of what was happening to his child, right? And we'll get into what I do now, but I think the hardest part of all this, about me growing up as a Latina in Virginia, is that I saw my parents, both of my parents, but right now, highlighting my father, work so hard in every sense of the way, and raised me to be, the person I am today, and then ultimately totally forget who he was as an individual, and totally not being able to enjoy really the work of, the hard work he put into me and my brother, and not knowing, and just not knowing us at all. Like, he passed away not knowing anybody and not forgetting all of us. So that was really, really difficult. And my mom's still around. She still lives in Fauquier County, and we support her in every way that we can. Uh, but that transition alone, I mean, that experience alone with my father and my mother and my brother and his wife and myself ultimately getting married was such a life-changing moment for me.
Yeah. Well, I know how much your father means to you, and it shows in literally everything that you have involved yourself in, but also just in your day to day. There's so many things that you said that I kind of want to do
Yeah.
some deep dives on, but I think just to highlight the last bit, these themes of sacrifice that are often um, present in the stories of Latinos and immigrants, just generally, the tenacity and perseverance that you exemplified, but that you inherited from him. And just, the push and the drive that you have, I think, you're honoring your parents in such an amazing way. Um, Language was one of the first things that you spoke about. I remember I got placed, I don't, it's not maybe politically correct, but I got placed in some special classes when I was young because I couldn't speak English either. And ESL wasn't a thing when I was in kindergarten. I don't know if that was the case for you.
Once I got to first or maybe second grade, yes. I was in ESL all the way up to fourth. And then my mom was tired of it. My daughter can speak English. I wish it was maybe a year more because I could have really benefited from it. But I think it was just sense of shame, because they pull you out and you're pulled out with several other non-speaking students, and everyone else who speaks English are like, oh yeah, they're going out to, I don't know what they're doing, or some new, and it's like, oh, they're gonna go learn English. So it's kind of like, I don't know.
Well, it's such a gift to be bilingual, right? And sometimes in this country, it feels like some folks view it as a detriment, or they penalize you for it because they don't understand the complexities of navigating life in two languages, especially when your parents don't speak English. So what was that like for you as you were navigating school, work, the college admissions process, your father's illness, and trying to be basically the conjoiner, the catalyst, the focal point of navigating all of that kind of language access issue?
Yeah, I think at a very young age, I was making the calls to AT&T or DirecTV to pay off my mom's balance, because my mom sometimes, couldn't mail things on time or whatever. And I have my customer service voice. I developed a customer service voice at a very young age. My brother works at a bank, and he started working at a very young age. Well, not a very young age, but like in his 20s. And my mom would say, "Can you call your brother at the bank? Because they don't understand me when I ask for him." And so I'd call him like, "Hi, I was wondering if I could speak to Joe Carbajal, please." And I was like 8. And I remember going, when I'd go visit my brother at work, like, "That's your sister? That's who calls?" Yeah, that's my little sister. Um, and then, I also lacked some sort of, I didn't learning the ropes and learning what I needed to, fill out, like you're saying, to go to college or qualify for financial aid or scholarships or whatever. It was a difficult process. It really was. But, and, asking for my mom for these documents that I needed for X and Y. And at the same time, working with my sister-in-law to figure out what's going on with dad. And also getting, terrible health news at the same time, because his dad, his health declined, a lot of that, you would get calls from doctors or the nursing home telling you that this is where your father is now, and your father can no longer eat by himself, or your father needs help doing this and that. And so you're getting you're also getting bad news while you're also trying to like navigate through life, and then translating that as well to your mother, because she also needs to know what's happening to her husband and his health. I would say that all that experience, from professional to personal to emotional, really just fed my ambition and kind of, I don't know, motivation, and also willing to just maybe think differently sometimes, and all in a good way, because there was always this sense of survival in that, in all those aspects of my life. Like, dad needed to be okay, mom needed to be taken care of because dad's probably going to pass away, and they're not, mom works at a grocery store, like there's like a financial responsibility that might come from me and my brother. School, I needed to graduate at UVA, like unless something terrible happens, you can stay an extra year, otherwise you have your 4 years and you're out of there. And so I only had 2 years. I had to make sure that I had a decent GPA, and also try to figure out what internships I'm going to apply to. And then like my personal life, I think my own mental health, which was just not great in college and even after college, balancing all that kind of gave me the tools that maybe not necessarily were given to me in a gracious way, but were given to me nonetheless, and has helped me move in my career, I guess, in my professional career.
How did you learn to embrace those tools and gifts?
It wasn't before, experiencing deep depression and anxiety, seeing a therapist and getting on medication, because at first all those tools and gifts that you say were more seen as anxiety driven problems or scenarios that I felt that I was never going to get out of. I was never going to find a job after college. I was never going to let alone get an internship. Like, I'm never going to make enough money to help my mom. My dad's only going to get worse. I'm never going to be able to help him find a good place of care, or at some point we were dealing with finding him a nurse to take care of him at home. I'm never going to find a Spanish speaking nurse in a rural part of Virginia. Like, that's not, and then myself, like, I'm never going to get married. No one's going to want to deal with like my family problems and my debt that I've incurred from college and after college. And until I had a realization that I really needed to seek help. I was a young professional. I just graduated college. I had a couple gigs before working in the governor's office, and that job itself was very stressful. I was 22, 23, analyzing legislation that I had never heard of, or policy issues that I'd never heard of. And then I'd have to sit there in the governor's policy conference room and tell him what the bill did. And I mean, it would go through various senior leaders, but it would be my recommendation as to whether or not we would sign the bill, veto the bill, or amend the bill, right? And again, I shared with you my background. I was never exposed to that kind of like professional setting until that experience. And so asking for help without feeling dumb was a little nerve-wracking, right? Because these people who are his policy directors, legislative directors, chief of staffs are people who are incredibly smart and have been in the game for years and know how to interpret legislation, know how the policymaking process works. And here I am as a 22-year-old girl or 23-year-old girl trying to, I guess, fake it till you make it, so to speak, in this time of my life. And the anxiety was out the roof. The depression was out the roof. And I was in a city. I moved to Richmond. I didn't really know a lot of people. Luckily, I met people through the job, and they were all great. And I'm friends with a lot of them. I mean, Richmond, had it not be me moving to Richmond, I probably would have never met you either, Alex. But all that was just, I realized I need help. And somebody talked to me about seeing a therapist. And, within the Latino culture, therapists, depression, antidepressants, that's not a thing. Uh, and it might be different now, because I think that, of course, COVID has exposed a lot of that mental health issues, but then it wasn't. And my mom would say, "What? Why are you so stressed out? Are you kidding me? You have this nice job in the governor's office. You're young, and it's not like you're working on your feet 40 hours a week. I mean, you have you're living in an apartment with a few other people, and you seem like you're doing great." Just like, no, like I feel terrible. So I went to see a therapist, and she helped unveil, and just kind of like an onion, peeling each layer back of like where my sense of anxiety, my sense of self-worth, why I was feeling certain ways, childhood trauma, everything, as to help me see why I felt so down about myself at that time. So that really helped. And then that was that kind of, that once you're at the bottom, the only way to go is up. So when I was at the bottom, I had no other choice but like, okay, I need to get myself out of here. And I started taking medication that really helped. I started hiking. I don't know. I started doing like naturey things, which now I hate, but I started doing other things than living in my own mind, finding excuses to do something other than healing myself, whether that's going out and partying, drinking, hanging out with people that didn't care about me, things like that. And ultimately, those tools that you speak of help me just think about life differently, and also help me in my professional career, as far as like how I approach things, how I think about things, how that there's no such thing as a dumb question. We're all trying to figure it out ourselves. Some people are genuinely there to help you, and there's not, I shouldn't always live with the skepticism that everyone hates me, or that people think I'm dumb, because if I was dumb, I probably wouldn't be where I am now, So you kind of start, you know, uh, softening up those insecurities and slowly working it into something that can help you in the long run. And that's kind of how it, all those scenarios, all those things that I told you about have really helped me now.
Yeah. Well, so you find yourself looking around the room when you're in those halls of power, right? And you might not see people who look like you or who relate to your experience, and you question whether you belong there. But the very fact that you're there means that you belong there, right?
Yeah.
And there's this kind of gap that I think can feel quite lonely, because your parents had a very different kind of upbringing in life, and then they, you know, and I'm speaking generally, I think this is an experience that a lot of Latinos have. They come here, expect to give you a better and different life, yet don't necessarily understand what that looks like. And so you're kind of in this strange middle where you're navigating the quote unquote American dream or how to achieve it, while trying to honor what your parents did, what they sacrificed, although they don't totally understand that either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's 100% true.
And you've navigated it beautifully, even though it comes with those struggles. It does. And so it sounds like you have had to, and I think a lot of us have had to learn how to accept and embrace and navigate, live life in that middle here, right?
100%. I completely agree with that. I think there's been many instances that, thanks to my professional career, I've had opportunities to meet or be exposed to things that I just never thought in a million years. Little Lisette, who was, taking the trash out for these these office buildings or vacuuming or cleaning bathrooms, what have you, would one day sit at a table with, you know, a congressman or a US senator or a governor, or be interviewing somebody or being recognized by an organization. And never, ever, or speaking in front of 300 people. Like I, I get overwhelmed myself. And I, when I talked to my therapist about this, said, you know, if I could go back in time and tell little Lisette, who was just a ball of stress all the time because of everything that was happening in her life, and tell her like, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to end up all right. I wish I could, I think, but at the same time, you know, I say that, but I also kind of probably wouldn't, because then I wouldn't be who I am today. Right. But there were moments back in my life, that back when I was younger, that I really wish I could go back to the Lisette and just say, hey, you're going to be all right. It's going to be all right. You just keep going with the flow. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be okay. So yeah, those experiences. And then I reflect back on my mom and my dad and how they, you know, unless I tell my mom and I explain to her, Mom, I just had this great opportunity. Like, I just met the governor of so-and-so and his wife loved me and we're just hitting it off. They're so great people, blah, 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 blah. And Mom's like, oh my gosh, wow, that's so great. Like, that's the, you know, and meanwhile, like, my mom works at a deli department of a grocery store, and she's like, well, let me tell you what happened. So today this customer came in, and I'm just like, so like we shared, she's happy for me. But then there's times where like I tell her like there's just this bill that I've been monitoring, and she just she doesn't understand. And she's like, well, anyways, I need you to help me pay this bill because I've called 3 times. And I'm like, Mom, sometimes like, you know, it's like, there's very different, again, living in that middle where it's like, that's great, I'm glad you're doing all this, but I still need you to come and help me, like, you know, call the customer service line and figure out why my bill is late.
That's really funny. Well, I think that 2 things. Steel is forged in fire, right? And without all of the challenges, without going through it, we can't recognize our strengths and build upon them, right? And then secondly, you're a bridge. We have to be bridges. We're bridges to our cultures, to our parents, to between this society that we live in and our roots, the places that we came from and the people that we grew up around. And I think that oftentimes that is it can feel like a burden as Latinos at times, but it's a great responsibility and an honor and privilege that I have tried to embrace, and it sounds like you have too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's it like now? Now that you have kind of embraced all of those things, obviously we're all works in progress, right? But how have you taken all of the things that you've learned, that you've experienced, what you've navigated, and applied it to your life as a Latina working in government relations and banking and all of the different spheres of influence that you're in?
Well, I'm still working on myself. And I still see a therapist and I'm still on antidepressants. So let's just be honest there.
It's where we plug the sponsorship for one of those mental health apps.
Yes.
Okay.
Pause it right here and let's just be like, if you need help, please call. You know, my father passed away 3 years ago, and my father's death was, I thought that the 9-10 years of watching him slowly pass away were the hardest 9 to 10 years of my life. But actually seeing him pass away, like actually witnessing death, was the hardest thing I could ever imagine. And shortly after my dad died, I had the deepest, most just awful depression that I just never thought I would endure. The fact that I just felt there was nothing really worth it after his death. Like life just wasn't worth it. Suicidal thoughts came to mind. Just days where I'd just stay in bed. I did not want to do anything. Uh, and all the while on my professional side of life, I had this amazing opportunity to work for this organization that to me was my dream job. I said, oh my gosh, this is what I've always wanted. It was a great, way to honor my father. It was something that I thought that I knew a lot about, and had talked a lot about. And so I got the job, and it was about 6 months after my dad died. And between dealing with the grief and the emotional mental health aspect while having this incredible opportunity professionally, but that had a lot of ties back to the experience that I had just gone with my father, and aging and cognitive impairment and care for him. There was a lot of correlations between my personal experience and my job, but I loved that job and they were great people. But I would be lying if I told you that internally, like mentally, I wasn't, it was a struggle to try to, you know, separate work from what I was dealing with, because I was dealing with a terrible, terrible depression. And ultimately the pandemic hit. So this is probably now going on year 2 that my father had passed. I was laid off from that job, and pandemic, I mean, a lot of people were laid off during the pandemic, as you know, and I thought that I was never going to, I saw my world crumbling. I said, there's just why? And I was upset. I felt like I had failed. And again, I mean, the people I worked with were great, and it was never about like job performance or anything like that. It was just the truth of the matter. We were going through a pandemic, and this was happening, and I was one of the hundreds of thousands of people that got laid off during the pandemic. And so I I didn't know what I was going to do. And mind you, like at this point, I felt right that I had done everything right to lead up to this, that ultimately led to this job opportunity that I didn't see coming. And I had, I'd graduated with my master's. I had taken these leadership classes. I had all these, I had these amazing job opportunities beforehand. I thought, I had done everything well. And so when that happened, I was just a wreck. I was a wreck. And I'm very fortunate to have really good mentors and really good friends who immediately offered to help and find me like a temporary job or whatever. And I did, but I realized that it was a blessing in disguise of me being let go of this job. And the reason why was because I took the time during the layoff, the temporary job, and then ultimately going to CapitalOne to really reflect on myself and the grieving process and what I really wanted to do with my life. And for the longest time, I had been focusing on healthcare policy because the passion was there. My father was going through this. This is what I cared about. Um, and I didn't really think about, how it was impacting me mentally. And from the outside looking in, you would think, wow, this girl has this great job. She's doing these great things. She has all these great exposures, and she just got accepted to so and so, or she just got appointed to so and so board. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is great. Like, this is building me up. But if I really looked inside myself, I wasn't happy because I was dealing with a very, very dark grief that I hadn't just dealt with after his passing. I mean, once he passed, but for many years. And so I thought I used that time to reflect on that, and it all kind of made sense that I really needed to first be okay with myself and accept and love myself and actually embrace what I have achieved instead of seeking for the next best thing, the next shiny item, the next job title, whatever, and really just think about what I've been able to accomplish because of my parents, the people I've surrounded myself with, my life experiences, and really embrace that and hold that in and not be so, there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but being ambitious in the sense that there's there's no self-care within that ambition. It's just, you're just constantly seeking the next best thing. And so that time that, like I shared between the layoff and Capital One, I really used that time to reflect on that myself. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I was a mess. I really was. And, but I would say, like, you reached out. I had people who had worked in the governor's office reach out, people who had made friendships just throughout my profession and my career that were all willing to help. And they just came out of nowhere. And that was just another thing that I realized, like, Lisette, you are loved, you are appreciated. You're not this failure, or, you're not this and that. Cause these were the thoughts that were going to my mind, that all these things I've been doing, like, what does it even matter? And this and that. And it just made me help reflect on who I am and who I am as a person and what I want to do moving forward and the kind of person I want to be moving forward. I've always emphasized being authentic and honest. I think authenticity, especially in this profession in government relations, is so important. Lobbyists are often seen as terrible people. And I don't want to be seen as a terrible person. I want to be seen as an honest person who cares about what they're doing and, not give you, fake information or whatever, or just be seen as a schmoozer or whatever the word is, but just an honest person that really cares and, is going to, whether you want to say it, and cares about their job. That's it. And so I did that. And so I when I think about, that reflection, I just emphasized it even more about being authentic and being honest. And so I also realized that I probably shouldn't be in healthcare right now, especially if I'm dealing with grief and I'm not over my father's death. We're in year 3 now. And sometimes, I still think, I mean, not sometimes, I think about him every day. And I can't get over that emptiness and sadness. And so when the opportunity came to work for Capital One, at first I said, absolutely, like, no, I know nothing about the banking industry. And the banking industry is predominantly white, industry. It just, no. And lobbying for a bank, especially Capital One, are you kidding me? No, that's like way above there's no way. But again, like, it's just been an amazing time there. And I've been there for almost a year and some change. And I have the most incredible directors who are just so supportive and embrace whatever, crazy ideas I might have, and are great friends and mentors. And so that growth professionally has really helped my self-esteem and my mental health, because it's helped me just think about that I'm worth it, right? Because I just thought that I wasn't going to do anything after I got laid off. Like, I just thought the world was over at 29 or whatever. Like, the world was over. And just think that, it's okay to take advantage of opportunities that, sometimes are not the most comfortable, but you just never know how it end up. And in my case, it ended up pretty well. And so I really enjoy it. I've learned a lot, and also I've met so many incredible people along the way.
Tearing up over here a little bit, because what you say is just you're so forthright and genuine about your experiences. And this speaker series, that Mesa was born out of a very similar place and a similar experience, where I also didn't know what the hell I was gonna do or what really trying to engage with what was important. And so I thank you so much for sharing that, bringing that to life, because so often we go through that alone. And I think we don't do anything in isolation. We have to do it with community. We have to rely on our friends and the people who care. And you are just such an inspiration in that way. And I'm just so very grateful to know you and to consider you a friend. So,
Alex, thank you.
So we usually wrap these things up by trying to promote Latino culture, specifically food, businesses. So my final question for you, what is your favorite Latin food? Where can you get it?
Oh my gosh. Obviously Peruvian food. And where can I get it? My mom's kitchen in Northern Virginia.
Of course. Was there a particular like dish that you're just like, Mom, you need to
Oh yes.
Me right now?
So Tallarines verde con papa a la huancaína y bistec. And I know that's a lot of calories and probably not the best thing, but you know what? I don't care. That is my favorite dish. And every time I go see my mom up in Northern Virginia, that is the first thing she makes for me. And I'm just, and she makes enough so I can bring back to Richmond. And it's when my husband, he's white and he wasn't really exposed to Peruvian food until after he met me. I think he may have tried some dishes, but now it's like, he loves it just as much as I do. So now my mom makes like double. So we try to divide up the portions and I'm a little greedy. And sometimes I'm like, oh, well, you don't really need that much. I mean, I'm the one that, really grew up with it. And I miss the food. So maybe I should have a little bigger portion than you. And he's like, but yes, I love, and then my mom makes papa rellenas, which is essentially like a potato and inside stuffed with ground beef and like some seasoning and et cetera, et cetera. And amazing, like just Peruvian food. And I mean, obviously Latin American food is amazing, but just because I'm from Peru and that's all I've had all my life for the most part, until of course I moved by myself.
And your husband learned how to make some of it too.
Yes, he's an amazing cook. He is an amazing cook. He has his own little Peruvian cookbook that half the time he doesn't even need. He now knows how to make the stuff. And he goes to the tienda and buys the peppers that we use for a lot of the dishes that we make, like ají panca or ají amarillo. And then like, I know MSG is like a big no-no, but my mom, I didn't even know about MSG until I got married with my husband and about how terrible it is. But my mom always put Ajinomoto in that food. And I thought it was the best food in the world. And I never thought about it twice and like the dangers and the health risk and anything like that. And when they told him, yeah, and you put a little Ajinomoto, and he's like, what is that? And then he reads the thing. He's like, I was like, what's the problem? And now we have Ajinomoto in our pantry. So like, whatever.
Nice. Well, when you can't get it in your mom's kitchen, where do you usually go?
There is one restaurant in Ashland, Virginia, not too far away from Kings Dominion. It's probably like 20 minutes from our house. And I can't remember the name of the restaurant right now. I think they just recently rebranded. But they have great Peruvian chicken and they have a great lomo saltado. I have yet to try their tallarines verdes, but yeah, I really like going there. And their sauces are really good. So that's good too.
Lomo saltado. I think that's so good. And ceviche. Okay, I will say this here and hope that it doesn't get out of the room, but Peruvian ceviche is the best ceviche. All the other ceviches, I'm sorry, you're doing it wrong. Just doing it wrong.
I'm glad you think that. That is a very controversial subject. Like wherever you go in Latin America, they swear that their ceviche is the best ceviche. I will say, as a Peruvian, I think the Peruvian ceviche is the best ceviche, but to each their own. So I agree with you.
Unbiased opinion, it's the Peruvian ceviche.
Well, yes.
Anyway, Lisette, thank you so much. It's been just an honor, and I'm so glad to know you.
I'm glad to know you too, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hasta luego.
Bye.